Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. For the record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
For the record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record, whether you're here in the Cayman Islands or if you're listening overseas via the web. I am your host, Orit Connor, and of course, For the Record is a show produced and designed and produced by the management and staff of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on a local, regional, and international scene. Of course, you, our listening audience, are welcome to join me on For the Record every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m., where we discuss important matters. We discuss matters that have some significance to you as well. So sometimes you raise the topics as opposed to me as the host raising them, or my guests as well. And of course, our phone lines are always open. Our toll-free number, courtesy of Lime, is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and 949-6990. And of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. You no doubt heard on Radio Cayman this morning the governor's message about hurricane season and being prepared. Of course, today marks the start, 1st of June 2015, marks the start of the hurricane season here, the Atlantic hurricane season. So it is extremely, extremely important that you listen to the show this morning. If you have any questions, we want you to call in. If you have any observations, we want you to call in as well. While it is, yes, early in the season, we don't want you to take things for granted with us. So we have in our studio this morning the Honorable Franz Manderson, Deputy Governor of the Cayman Islands. We also have with us Mr. Eric Bush, who is the Chief Officer in the Premier's ministry. I want to welcome them this morning. Mr. Manderson, good morning. Welcome back to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Connor, and good morning to everyone out there. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mr. Bush, good morning. Welcome back to For the Record as well.
Good morning, sir, and thank you for having us.
Okay. We heard the governor's message in relation to the hurricane season. Like I said earlier, today marks the official start of the season. NOAA, which is the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, has predicted that there will be anywhere between 6 to 11 named storms. And when they talk about named storms, they're talking about winds that are of 39 miles per hour or higher. And between those 6 and 11 named storms, 3 and 6 could become hurricanes, which would be winds of 74 miles per hour or higher. And at most, 2 of those are expected to be major hurricanes defined as category 3, 4, or 5, which will have winds of 111 miles per hour or higher. Last year's prediction of a pretty slow season seemed to have been pretty correct, but we know that hurricane prediction has not yet become an exact science, and we're probably pretty far away from it as well. Comments, Mr. Manderson?
Yes, sir. Yeah, while it is anticipated that we will have a less than normal hurricane season, we all know that it only takes one storm to cause havoc in the Caribbean and certainly to do devastation on the Cayman Islands. So I think the thing that we must focus on is to be prepared. You should have already gone out and got your hurricane supplies. We had our day of preparedness on the holiday just a few weeks ago to get everybody prepared up. And I think that is so very important, is that we focus on the fact that we need to be prepared. We go through our hurricane plan for ourselves and our families, our businesses, to ensure that all of the necessary bases are covered in terms of having bottled water that will last us up to a week, some non-perishable goods as well. But I think there are a number of changes that is happening now that makes us want to ensure that we're even ahead of the game. For example, we have a new system with passports right now where you just can't run over to the passport office and get a brand new passport if it's running out. So that is something that I would want everyone to be aware of, is that look at your passports now. If they're going to expire in a few months, get your passport application in and get your passport renewed.
Mm-hmm. Can we, Mr. Madison, can we focus a little bit more on the passport issue before you go on to other points?
Sure.
That is extremely important now, bearing in mind the fact that passports now will all be printed in the UK, starting from last month.
8th of May.
Yes.
8th of May. So, and then, of course, the summer now, when everyone wants to travel, higher demand and everything else. So we can't really overemphasize that point that people should check their travel documents to ensure. Now, there may be some who may have multiple travel documents, or at least two, Cayman Islands passport as well as a UK passport, but they want to ensure that both of them are current.
Right.
In the case of the Cayman passport, if you're going beyond the U.S. and you're traversing the U.S., you need to ensure that you have a visa, because the waiver would only get you one entry into the U.S. as well. You may want to expand on that as well, Mr. Manderson.
Absolutely. So my encouragement is to, if you have a Cayman passport, get yourself a visa so that you will allow yourself easy access in and out of the United States, travel beyond the United States. That is the preferable option, because, as you rightly said, a waiver issued by the passport office only allows you to travel from the Cayman Islands into the United States. It doesn't allow you to travel from third countries back to Cayman through other countries. That's very important. And if you do have multiple passports, it's important that you make sure that they're valid, and if they're not going to expire soon, please make every effort to have them renewed in a timely manner. And of course, when there is a hurricane approaching, please make sure that you put them in a safe, high and dry place. It doesn't make sense to have all the documents all in ready order and then they get destroyed because you didn't put them up carefully. So those are some of the key things that I think we should emphasize on this morning. Is travel documents. The ability to travel is essential. We know how many people left the island prior to Hurricane Ivan, how many left afterwards. You don't want to get stuck here if you don't want to be.
Mr. Bush, and I know immigration falls, under your purview in the ministry.
Yes, sir.
In the past, the immigration department has been able to give pretty accurate figures in terms of the number of visitors, tourists that we have on the island at any given time. That is an important aspect for the airlines. So we know exactly how many people have to leave or how many people we will additionally have to house as a result of that. Have we seen any improvements, any upgrades to the immigration system? Can you tell our listening audience exactly what we have and what our abilities are in terms of giving those figures?
Sure. Thank you, sir. The border control capabilities that we had 10, 15 years ago, we still have now. In fact, we think we've improved on that. Whilst our business process may have changed with outgoing passengers, for the most part, all of the information, instead of being gathered by an immigration officer, is gathered now by the airlines and then transferred to us. So we know exactly who's coming in and who's going out, whether by air or by ship. So the numbers of visitors at any given time, we have those. If Mr. Madison, as chair of the Hazard Management Executive, feels that there is a threat, that we need to mobilize, that is one of the pieces of information that we discuss in that executive committee to determine what communication needs to go out to the hoteliers, to the broader media, advising that this is a legitimate threat, and we recommend visitors to make arrangements to leave early, or et cetera, based on our capabilities on island versus the amount of people we have.
And of course, there are overseas embassies that are extremely interested in their nationals here on the island, and how many of them are on the island, and even, if possible, names as well. Can you enlighten our listening audience to that?
Absolutely. That is another gateway that we utilize, is the honorary consuls for the various nations. Obviously, Jamaica, UK, United States, Canada, the Philippines, the larger demographics of residents, but also visitors. And we do provide that information, that specific national information, to the honorary consuls if and when needed for that purpose.
Okay. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Franz Manderson, who is the Deputy Governor in the Cayman Islands. We also have Chief Officer Mr. Eric Bush. When we come back, we're going to start talking about government's preparation for hurricane season, what has been done so far, and what will be done during the course of the season. So please stay tuned, because this is extremely important to you. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Orit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Franz Manderson, Deputy Governor of the Cayman Islands, and Chief Officer Mr. Eric Bush. I want to remind you that in addition to LED Lighting, Engineering and Design being our sponsor, we have a new sponsor on board, and For the Record is also brought to you by FinCor, Finance and Corporate Services. FinCor is client-focused, technology-driven, and cost-effective. So on For the Record, you will be hearing much more about FinCor. We want to thank them for coming on board as well. Before we went to the commercial break, I promised you that we would talk about government's preparation for the hurricane season as well. Gentlemen, if we can talk about the shuttering up process, and then if we can talk also about the contingency plans that each ministry portfolio, each government department has to have in place, and their recovery plan as well.
Yes, sir. I'll speak more generally, and then I'll ask Mr. Bush to speak specifically about some of the things that the ministries are doing. But for us, yes, we had a very efficient shuttering exercise where our hardworking members of the Public Works Department go around to all of the government buildings to make sure that they can be shuttered up, to look to see whether anything needs to be changed, any types of repairs needs to be done. I'm told that went exceptionally well, done in record time, and we are at a good state of readiness in terms of our shuttering exercise. We have encouraged all the government agencies to ensure that they have continuity of operation plans. because as you can appreciate, government will expect it to mobilize rapidly after a major storm to ensure that we can provide major services and essential services. So that is something that we have paid close attention to, and we have pushed to make sure that all our departments have a hurricane preparedness plan and also continuity plans. We're also doing some exciting things in terms of our NEOC, our National Emergency Operations Center, and I'll ask Mr. Bush to speak to that.
Mr. Bush?
Yes, sir. As Mr. Madison said, I think this is where the government truly practices what they preach. Every start of hurricane season, we really do a media blast to remind residents, visitors alike, businesses that they need to use this time now to just pay attention on themselves, pay attention and ask the question, what if? What would we do if this happened? What would we do if that happened? To this, as Mr. Madison said, each ministry and department and unit has their own continuity of operations plans that addresses hurricanes and how we prepare for a imminent strike or something other catastrophic, a fire, a flood, a deliberate act, etc. So those plans exist, and it's around this time that the ministries, departments, and units are asked to review that, because in any year things change, personnel change, business processes change, locations change. So we are doing that for ourselves because we recognize as a business, as Mr. Madison said, when these things happen, we're expected to gear up and continue. We don't stop. We can't go overseas. We are here. We're here to serve. So to that end, we have the plans. We are exercising those plans now to see how they work and see how perhaps new personnel work, how our communication system works. We had 2 or 3 weeks ago a government-wide communication exercise whereby simply we checked our radios, we checked our satellite phones to see if they worked, and we had a radio check, a government-wide radio check that, of course, is quite broad, lasted 3 or 4 hours because each individual, each department that was issued a radio, we had to make sure that the radio was working, it was received, it was able to transmit, but more importantly, the individuals themselves knew how to use it.
Okay, and let's talk about the government administration building. Is that going to be where the operations center for disasters is now located? We know that in the past, for instance, we used the fire station for that purpose. Any changes? That's
correct, sir. A policy decision was made to utilize existing space within the government administration building. It's no longer new, but it's certainly fit for purpose. It is, it is built, it's hardened, it is expected to withstand and be fit for purpose during and after a hurricane. It has redundancies in electricity and water and sewage. Therefore, we're utilizing space that is normally used for training, development, or meetings, purchasing special furniture that can be deployed within 2 hours, and have a functioning emergency operations center within the government administration building. This is a change in policy direction from a standalone, purpose-built EOC that I think was priced at around $10 to $12 million.
Okay, now I know education falls under one of the political ministries, but in the past we have seen at times some frustration, some confusion as to when schools should be closed. The timing of the closing of schools, bearing in mind that a lot of children have to be picked up by their parents, and also when government workers are released, because with government providing most of the essential services, they have to stay on, but at the same time you want to also give consideration to your employees and their families, as well. Any policy decisions that have been made in those two areas, education, if you may know, and certainly the portfolio of the civil service falls under the deputy governor's purview.
Yes, sir. I mean, what would happen is, and we had as Mr. Bush said, we had an exercise about this a few weeks ago, with that, once I get a call to say, we have a storm that's approaching, we would normally hold a meeting of the National Hazard Management Council, and we'll have all the major players there, all the chief officers, key heads of departments, members of the statutory authorities, and we would basically get a full briefing from our persons in the Met Office, and as a result of that, then we would start making some key decisions. And it's around that table that we would make decisions in terms of when would we recommend to the minister and to the chief officer there that the schools would be closed, when we would release government workers, so that there will be a really planned operation, and people will have lots of notice as to when schools will close, when will government workers be sent home, because we need to ensure that people are given an opportunity to go home, to prepare, to do some last minute fixing up around their homes, for example, get their shutters sorted out. So we want to make sure that we could do that, and we do believe that we have the proper structure in place to achieve that.
And going back to the government administration building, you, in addition to having the emergency managers there, you have the ability also to house some of their families, because it is extremely difficult for you to have your family one place and you being the other and not knowing what's happening. Again, so that we can give some assurances to our civil service workers as well as their families, what's being done in that area, Mr. Bush?
I'll take it, sir. Yes, sir. We have decided, obviously, that the government administration building is not a hurricane shelter, so it's not open to everybody to come and shelter in it. But those key individuals who are expected to be in the building, then they'll be allowed to bring their families, and we will have them on, in a safe area in the building where they can be kept comfortable. So that is something that that we have decided. Along with that, and it's raised a number of issues, and I was a few years ago I attended a hurricane conference just after we had the tragedy in New Orleans from the major hurricane there. Is that
Katrina,
yes. Was that you need to have, everyone needs to know exactly what they're going to do with their pets, because it seems like almost every household now has a pet of some kind, which is absolutely fabulous.
And sometimes those pets are more important than some of the households.
Exactly. And what I was told in the hurricane is that a lot of people stayed in their homes because they didn't have anywhere to take their pets, and they drowned in their homes because they didn't want to leave their pets there. So I want to get a message out there to everyone, is that if you're going to be going to shelters, find out what the policies are in relation to taking your pets. You need to have a very clear understanding as to what you're going to do with your pets in the event that you're having to evacuate, or you're going to have to leave the island. Whatever your plans are, please make sure that you include your pets and ensure that they can be accommodated wherever you're going.
Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I am your host, Orrit Connor, and my guests in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Frans Manderson, Deputy Governor of the Cayman Islands, and we also have with us Mr. Eric Bush, who is the Chief Officer in the Premier's Ministry. We're talking about hurricane preparedness today, Monday, June 1st, 2015, being the official start of the hurricane season, the Atlantic hurricane season. So please stay tuned. We're going to go to the news. When we return, we will continue our discussion, and we invite you to join us as well. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Orrit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Franz Manderson, Deputy Governor of the Cayman Islands. We also have Mr. Eric Bush, who is the Chief Officer in the Premier's Ministry. I also want to remind you that For the Record is brought to you by LED, Lighting, Engineering, and Design, located on Dorsey Drive. We also have a new company on board, a new sponsor, FinCore, Finance and Corporate Services. FinCore, where they are client-focused, technology-driven, and cost-effective. Mr. Manderson, I know that you have put in place travel policies in relation to the civil service, and I believe those guidelines may also extend to ministries, but certainly on the travel agenda for senior civil servants who are involved in disaster preparedness, attendance to the National Hurricane Conference that takes place annually in the United States must still be a priority, top priority on the list of conferences that one would be allowed to travel to if they are involved in disaster preparedness. Can you tell our listening audience about that?
Yes, sir, absolutely. While we, like you have correctly said, having faced a very effective travel policy which has really cut costs on our travel and made it more efficient and effective. And we do encourage persons to upskill themselves and to be aware of best practice as it changes. So yes, I attend the a hurricane conference I think I do it every 2 years, and Mr. Bush and people from his ministry will attend annually. There's two conferences. There's the Florida governors, and then I think they're the National Hurricane, and we sort of switch in between so that everyone's not doing the same conference, and that we're tapping into both. So I think that has gone exceptionally well. We do have good representation from the Cayman Islands at this conference, because it is where we can gain so much knowledge about what is happening around the world, especially in the Caribbean and in Florida. Because if we don't need to reinvent the wheel, then if it's working somewhere else, if someone has policies and procedures that are working, I will never forget the presentations that were done in the conference that I went to shortly after Katrina, and they talked about the lessons that they learned about storm surge, which Mr. Bush will speak to in a minute. And like I said, having been prepared, know what's going to do with your pets. These are things that will save your life, and it is so very important that we understand what are some of the downfalls and some of the things that you should do, and some of the things that you should do. Like I said, best practice, so that we can pass that information on to the people of the Cayman Islands. And I encourage participation in that conference, and so far I think that has worked very well for us, and that we've been able to gain knowledge, but also make good contacts, keep the lines of communication open with our colleagues in the various disaster management agencies in the United States and around the Caribbean. So that has actually gone very well, sir.
Mr. Bush?
Yes, sir. This year I did attend the National Hurricane Conference in Texas in April. That is where Dr. Phil and Dr. Gray announced their prediction of a less than active hurricane season. I've been attending for the last 7 or 8 years, and I must say I noticed a drastic reduction in the amount of attendees as well as the amount of vendors. But the subject matter to me has improved. So whilst the quantity has gone down, the quality has gone up. Specifically around the Caribbean, the National Hurricane Conference has made a deliberate decision to incorporate a full day of Caribbean-specific conversations, and they invite persons from different Caribbean countries, emergency managers, policymakers, etc., to come and talk about what they are doing in their island nation and how they're responding to different things. One of the reasons I believe that the reduction in the amount of people and vendors has taken place is that the United States has not witnessed a major hurricane landfall since 2005, since October 23rd, 2005, with Hurricane Wilma. I think that shows that we are at a lull in the U.S., but from lessons learned with Superstorm Sandy, that it doesn't take a hurricane. Superstorm Sandy was a subtropical storm, and it was the surge that caused most of the damage, the $70 billion worth of damage. Last year was a relatively slow year for us, unless you were Bermuda. Because Bermuda got hit twice in, I think it's less than 7 to 10 days by two hurricanes and tropical cyclones, and they felt the full effects of it. And whilst the damage was minimal, I would think that they would disagree that they've had a light couple of years. So whilst there is a prediction that it is going to be a less than active year, it only takes one. It only takes one major hurricane to affect us. And because of that, we have the responsibility as individuals, as members of a family, or as members of our organization and the government, to think about what our responsibilities are, what our capabilities are, and plan accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Now, this question, I'm really going to solicit personal opinions on it, but we constantly rely on the U.S. to take the lead when it comes to certain areas, and certainly when it comes to the hurricane conferences, we see more of the initiatives taking place in the U.S. But here in the Caribbean, we have CARICOM. We are all affected by hurricanes. We saw what happened with Hurricane Ivan. Grenada got hit. As a result of Grenada being hit and the UK rendering assistance to them, by the time they got down to the Cayman Islands, there was very little that they could do in terms of providing us with supplies or anything else. Is it time for us the Caribbean itself to get together and start to have these discussions and maybe to set up a regional body for hurricane or disaster preparedness in the Caribbean?
Yes, sir. Good question. I think that is an excellent idea. When I attended the hurricane conference, I think 2 years ago, I was touched by the number of persons there from the Caribbean. Almost every Caribbean island was represented, and we all got to talking there about sharing experiences, sharing best practices, and you're right. I think it'd be good if we sort of came together regionally and did something there, because we can speak from experience and we can share best practices. So it's something that I think we can look forward to, and maybe we can task Mr. Frederick with looking at that for us, Mr. Bush, as how we can work closely with more closely with our Caribbean neighbors. I think he does a good job now. I think our hazard management department does know on a first name basis their counterparts in other overseas territories. And the UK does a really good job of getting us all together in Miami. I think once a year, Mr. Bush can speak to that, about how to make sure that the overseas territories are ready and have a joined up approach. But then, yes, maybe we should be doing something for the wider Caribbean.
Okay, we have one caller online, so we're going to go straight to the phone lines now. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Ms. Daphne. How are you?
Morning.
And thank you for the very interesting topic that you're discussing this morning. It is never irrelevant here in Cayman, of course. But a couple of questions. One is, and perhaps the planning department would be better able to answer this question, but still you may be able to touch on it in some way, gentlemen. And that is, having gone through an experience what Ivan did to the Cayman Islands. We know that many, many buildings were lost, demolished, and I'm wondering if some of the very stringent rules, regulations about building are now, if it's a requirement whenever any new residential building an application is made to build a house, whether it's a small or a large home. These restrictions now in place that you must abide by this, or this, and this to get a permission for this house to be built. Second thing you might be able to answer me on is there was a piece of, I guess, I don't know what you call it, equipment, but state-of-the-art, whatever, regarding being able to monitor weather conditions and, the approach of hurricanes. Apparently, it's the newest thing on the market. And there was a question that it should not be housed at the airport because of what took place there during Ivan with, the ocean coming in right across the airport. Has that been relocated, or is it still at the airport? Those are the two questions that I forget the name of this certain type of equipment.
Probably Doppler radar. Would it be?
DOPLER?
DOPPLER, I think, yeah.
I think that's it.
Yes, yeah.
So that was the question.
Yeah, we'll certainly talk about that because we do have, a Doppler radar system here that was funded by the European Union. It's been in place now for about 3 years now as well. So two good questions, Ms. Daphne. Mr. Bush, and she must have been reading your mind in terms of earlier we were talking, about, whether or not people are becoming complacent now after Hurricane Ivan. We see lots of reconstruction in the South Sound area that was hit pretty badly by Hurricane Ivan. We hear, even here on For the Record, contractors calling up and people calling up about concerns about people wanting to build closer to the water. Can we talk about those those requirements that are there? Of course, this is more of a planning issue, and
Sure.
But you may know something about it.
No, absolutely, sir. Thank you, and thank you for the question, Ms. Daphne. One of the strategic outcomes and objectives of the government since 2004 was to learn and implement the lessons learned of Hurricane Ivan. One of the areas that the government has done so since Hurricane Ivan is strengthen, update, and improve our planning and building control regulations. Now that may be to the detriment of some people in that once regulation and more requirements are introduced and things are strengthened, that usually means more cost in building. But as a government, the reason for that is we understand that from the lessons learned in Hurricane Ivan, that we needed more control, more, if you will, expertise introduced in engineering and planning and design of structures. And those requirements now have been enshrined in legislation, planning legislation, building control legislation, and regulation, whereby now, for an architect to design your house, that's one part of the process. Since Hurricane Ivan, now you need to ensure that an engineer, a licensed engineer, reviews the plan and ensures that the structure of the roof and the foundation is sound and can withstand certain levels of hurricanes.
Okay. On the Doppler radar, we see now, some of the forecasts that we're getting locally, much more accurate.
Yes.
And then also for the wider Caribbean, it has huge implications as well, because that black hole that existed between Jamaica and Belize has now been filled with us having the Doppler radar here in the Cayman Islands as well, Mr. Manderson.
Yes. Yes, sir. And thanks, Ms. Daphne, for the question. We do have the Doppler radar station. It is not housed at the airport. It's on high ground in East End. Very, very safe location. We had lots of expertise come in and help us design that and build it. Mr. Connor and his team in the cabinet office at the time did a tremendous job in working with the UN, where we received funding. EU, sorry, yeah. And we were very grateful for their funding to be able to achieve that, because we wanted more precise weather forecasting, and now we are able to fill that huge gap. And I think we've been realizing that now over the last couple of years since we've had the Doppler radar, and that we're much more precise in our weather forecasting. So that has been a tremendous achievement for us as a country to have that. And we want to emphasize that when there is a hurricane approaching, there's a tendency to tune into CNN and get on the internet and look at all of these other areas of expertise where people are plotting, where the hurricane going, what's the intensity. But our recommendation is to tune locally. Go to Radio Cayman, to the local radio stations here, the National Weather Service here. Listen to our local news, because we'll be focusing on Cayman. If you listen to CNN, they're not necessarily going to focus on exactly what are the conditions going to be on the ground here. So we want to make people understand very, very clearly is, yes, it is always that good to go onto your internet and look on your phones and go to your favorite website to look at what's happening, but really pay attention to our local radio and our local broadcast here.
Excellent advice, Mr. Manderson. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Orit Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Franz Manderson, Deputy Governor of the Cayman Islands, and we have the Chief Officer in the Premier's Ministry, Mr. Eric Bush. Please stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to look at one of our neighbors and see how they are in relation to disaster preparedness, the implications that financing has to, for being prepared as well. So please stay tuned. Lots of important discussions taking place. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, which is brought to you by LED Lighting, Engineering and Design, and also by FinCore Finance and Corporate Services. We have one caller online. We're going to take that caller now. Our caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. O'Connor, and good morning to Mr. Manderson and to your other guests.
Good morning, Amjad. How are you?
Good morning, sir.
I'm all right. Good morning to everybody and to wider Cayman. I really just call always, we appreciate Mr. Manderson for his hard work for this country. He always give his time and offer to make our life safer. And I think, when Mr. Manderson is the Deputy Governor, and we are safer more, because I know all his attention and all his hard work for the people, and he doing all his effort always for the people. I just called today to give appreciation and thankful for his hard work.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
The effort he always made. You're welcome, sir. And I think it is our duty, the citizen of this country, to give appreciation to who's always give hard work. It's a word of thanks, give more encouragement to do more hard work and more good things. So it is our duty as citizens to give always the thank to the man who deserves that thank. Thank you, Mr. Manderson, for all what you do. That's all what I want to say, and keep up always the good work. Bless you and bless your family, sir.
So, thank you, sir, and same to you and your family, and thank you for taking the time to call, sir. Very much appreciated.
Thanks, Amjad. Gentlemen, on Friday, saw in the Jamaica Gleaner, there was a headline that read, "Jamaica not yet ready for hurricane season." And that statement was made by the local government minister, Noel Arscott. And he's basically saying that the country, Jamaica, is not where it needs to be in terms of preparedness. And he points out that the local government has been hard hit following the massive fire at the Riverton City landfill in St. Andrew that occurred in March. And according to estimates, the fire, which raged for over 2 weeks, will cost the government more than 300 million Jamaican dollars. So that is a financial setback, to them. But despite that, he also feels that the country. He also pointed out that if the country is hit by a major storm, Jamaica may be able to have access to the Caribbean Catastrophic Risk Insurance Facility, which is the CCRIF. Now, the CCRIF was really, really one of the projects or one of the initiatives by the World Bank that Minister Tibbetts was really, really excited about. And I recall attending a conference in London with him when we first found about this CCRF. And of course, the Cayman Islands signed up to it. They have refined it quite a bit because some of the requirements for you to be able to get claims from them were so stringent. They were so had to do with wind speeds and the timing of everything. I think that has now all been refined, and access to funding is probably a little bit easier because, as we all know, and many people experience, that a lot of the insurance companies, they took your money, took your premiums every year or every month, and then when it came time to pay out, you were either underinsured and all sorts of excuses not to have to pay out. CCRF operated almost like that as well. We did have some countries that did get something from them. We have, I think our premium is something like $1 million, either $1 million or $2 million US dollars a year. But is it money well spent?
I think having insurance is yes, money well spent, provided that you have a reputable insurance company that like you said, you're going to get paid out when the time does come. So yes, I think that is a valuable investment. We are very fortunate right now. We're operating surplus budgets. Minister Archer has said on numerous occasions, we're not out of the wood yet. It just takes a major catastrophe, and a lot of our savings are wiped out. So it's so very important that we have good insurance policies in place for nationally and personally to ensure that we are able to rebuild in a timely manner and not have to dip into our savings in order to rebuild. So yes, sir, I think that is a good investment and something that I support.
Okay. Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I am your host, Ort Connor, and my guest in studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Franz Madison, Deputy Governor of the Cayman Islands. We also have Mr. Eric Bush, who's the Chief Officer in the Premier's Ministry. We're discussing hurricane preparedness today, the 1st of June 2015, marking the start of the Atlantic hurricane season. Please stay tuned. We will be back with more discussions, and we certainly invite you to join us in the conversation as well. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where this morning we're discussing with the Honorable Franz Madison, Deputy Governor of the Cayman Islands, and Mr. Eric Bush, the Chief Officer in the Premier's Ministry. We're discussing hurricane preparedness in the Cayman Islands, this being the official start of the Atlantic hurricane season. I want to remind you that our phone lines are open. We've received a few calls. We know that you're listening, but some of you may also want to relate your past experiences, those who experienced Hurricane Ivan, because some of our listening audience, you heard Mr. Madison say earlier, we're not only appealing to residents, old residents, but new residents of the Cayman Islands, those of you who may not have experienced a hurricane before, for you to relate your stories to them, not to scare them, but to impress upon them the importance of being prepared. So I'm going to give out our phone numbers again. First, our toll-free number, 1-800-534-8255. Also, 949-8037 and 949-6990. And of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then you can email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. Speaking of phone calls, we now have two queued up. Let's go to the callers. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Mr. Orrit Connor, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Brown. Haven't heard from you in a while. How are you?
Been a while. Sometimes I refrain from calling and I just stay at home and I listen, as listening is also important.
Yeah, being a good listener is important.
Let me say good morning to Mr. Manderson and also to Mr. Bush. Gentlemen, how are you?
Good morning,
doing
sir.
today?
Fantastic. How are you, sir?
Doing very well, thank you. I must report I'm doing well. All right, now, only to say, Mr. Connor, that in my estimation, you are the country's leading talk show host at this moment.
Thank you.
And I say that because the country's leading talk show host has been knocked out of the water, Austin Harris. Yes, he's no longer with Cayman Crosstalk.
Yep, unfortunate.
Unfortunate, but I'm trusting that he will get back into radio at some point. If not in radio, perhaps it's time for Talk TV, because he also has television experience, and hopefully 2017 will find his name on the ballot moving forward with Change 2017.
Okay.
Now, as it relates to, because the job of talk show host, it's a very difficult job. One has to remain balanced. Even though you're not supposed to be political, it becomes very political, and the political powers of the day, if they deem it that you're not going in their direction, or if you're too much of an independent thinker, the powers that be will try to shut you down. Now, I'm not saying that has what has happened with the other talk show hosts there, but it makes me wonder, because and particularly when you're a government talk show host, you really have to trod the line with decency and with such an aplomb, with such a cautious way as to not come across as you're being biased, because it's not an easy job. It really isn't. But I think you do it with aplomb. I think you're fair, and well, as I said, you're the leading talk show host at the moment. That's my opinion. All right. As it relates to the hurricane season, you're welcome. I think preparedness is very important. Education is always important. But my concern is for those elderly, and I know quite a few, who are not in the rest homes, they're not in nursing homes, but perhaps they're still living at home. And those that refuse to leave, I don't know there's any law that says you have to force them to leave. But what do we do with individuals who refuse to leave home, either because all of their possessions are there, they have their cats, their dogs, so they fear leaving their pets behind? What do we do with those individuals who refuse to leave their home, particularly if they're in low-lying areas, at prone areas for flooding and the storm surge? I really want to know what we do. I mean, I could answer my own question, but I want to hear it from professionals. I think just let them be. How we find these individuals during the aftermath is how we find them. And also, Mr. Connor, you were talking there about Jamaica. Jamaica has close to 3 million people, 2-point-something million, not quite 3 million. And the truth of the matter is, we will never have enough hurricane shelters for the total population of any country. When you live in mountainous areas where you have landslides and whatnot, I'm fearful that not everyone will be saved, but we can only do our best to prepare the people. Knowledge is power, being prepared, being in readiness. And I remember Hurricane Ivan. I lived through that. I lived through Allen, Gilbert, but Ivan and Paloma are at the forefront of my mind, having lived through both of them. And it's an honor to be able to go into the schools with Simone Scott. I'm now rereading the book, The 32 Storm by Heather McLaughlin. A lot of information in there as it relates to the 32 hurricane. But being prepared is key, and knowing when to move. Don't wait for the last minute. And the aftermath, in my opinion, is just as bad as the torrential storm when that is pounding.
Certainly.
The aftermath. Thanks for taking my call, and continue to do a good job and ask the relevant questions. Don't be afraid. Don't let any prime minister or any
Don't worry about that, Quincy. I'll ask you sometime in a very diplomatic way, but I will. And being number one isn't important. What's important here is that we get the message out to our listening audience, that we keep them informed and empowered. But thank you very much. A very good question, and we're going to get to it. But what we're going to do is we're going to try to grab the other two callers, and then we can have our guests give a reply to the questions that were posed. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Morning.
Oh, I'm fine, thanks. So, see, this is Sammy Jackson.
Hi, Mr. Sammy.
Morning, sir.
Morning, sir.
And Mr. Madison and Eric.
Yes, sir.
Morning,
Listen, Mr. Madison, this is primarily for your information.
Yes, sir.
When I was prominent secretary or principal secretary, no one is prominent, so I did 116 years of history on hurricanes that affected the Cayman Islands within a radius of 120 miles. I had the tracks of some, let me find that now, from 1915 hurricane, 1932 Gilbert that hit Cayman Bright, 1980. I'm not Gilbert, Allen, and then Gilbert in 1988, Georges in 1998, Mitch 1999, Gordon 1994, Marco 1996, and the hurricane of 1944 that hit Grand Cayman only. Now, during that period, there was, oh gosh, sorry, I guess I'm not organized this morning. I got most of these on track. In 1876, I'm giving you dates for hurricanes that hit the Cayman Islands, or hit Grand Cayman especially. 1876, 1901, 1909, 1910, 1917, 1928, 1933, and then 1935, that hit Cayman Bragg, in 1939, that hit Cayman Bragg. And
is there something common amongst those that you want to point out to us, Mr. Jackson?
well, it's just that I wanted, if the deputy governor wants this information, I could.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, I'm certainly he would welcome that. I'm certain.
For instance, 1930. I just want to give a brief overlay on 1932. The hurricane developed northeast of Guadeloupe on October 31st at approximately 17 degrees north and 55 degrees west. It drifted southwesterly, then westerly. On November the 2nd, it was approximately 13 degrees north and 68 west, at which time it began to move in a west-northwest direction. On November the 6th, at approximately 15.5 degrees north and 8 west, it started to gradually turn to the north before turning to the northeast on the 7th of November. It reached a point of approximately 81.4 west and 100 miles slightly west of south of Grand Cayman. The hurricane hit Grand Cayman in the evening of the 7th with winds of approximately 150 miles an hour. It was at this time moving in a northeasterly direction. The storm surge, which has the worst effects on spots and Savannah, was 29.9 feet from a direction of 162 degrees. The hurricane continued in this direction at about 4 to 5 miles per hour. The eye passed over Cayman Brac on the night of the 8th. Winds were estimated to be at 200 miles per hour.
Wow.
The storm surge at that time was 32 feet. The damage and loss of life was extremely severe.
We have about 1 minute left, caller. We're going to need you to abbreviate some of that for us, please.
Well, I only got 2 lines left.
Okay.
The person was only, in Grand Cayman, only 1 person was killed.
Mm-hmm.
But there were 14 homes destroyed in Bordentown and many in East End. The spots in Savannah area was flooded with salt water. One house was moved inland 157 feet by the storm surge. There's more in it, but since I'm running out of time. But if I would like to briefly touch, if you give me the time,
Okay.
on the 1915 hurricane.
Caller, do you want to look that up and call us back, because we're going to go to the headline news now, but we will certainly, Ms. Susan will take your call back. We have one more caller queued up that we're going to take right after the headline news, and then we're going to ask you to call back so that you can give us that information on the 1915 hurricane. Will that be fine, caller? Mr. Jackson? Folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Art Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have the Honorable Franz Madison, Deputy Governor of the Cayman Islands. We have Chief Officer Mr. Eric Bush in the Ministry of the Premier. And we have with us the Director of the Office of, I'm going to say Office of Disaster Preparedness, but it's really the
Hazard
Management Cayman with us, Mr. McClary Frederick. So we have the real expert in the studio with us now. So please stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to take that caller. We hope Mr. Samuel will call back, and we're going to continue the discussion. Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where I'm your host, Stuart Connor. My guest in the studio discussing the start of the hurricane season, the Atlantic hurricane season, Deputy Governor, Honorable Franz Madison, Mr. Eric Bush, and Mr. McClare Frederick. We have one caller who has rejoined us. We're going to go straight to the phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome back to For the Record.
Good morning, sir, and I'll make this brief, but I thought it was important that I let you know I'm sure that other people like myself experienced this particular scenario with Hurricane Hattie. In the Hurricane Guide 2015, that particular hurricane is mentioned on page 55. But what I'd like, what I'd like to say about this particular hurricane, I recall young mother, a child less than 1 year old, actually, and on a Sunday in church, everyone is concerned. The weather service in Miami was the only real, information provider to us, and Hurricane Hattie was, its direction showed it was coming straight for Grand Cayman. Of course, it built up in intensity. We all decided in church that morning that we would come back early in the evening and have prayer in the church. We did. We prayed. We stayed there maybe an hour and a half. Suddenly, without warning, if I may use that, the late Miss Sister Teresa Powery, she's the mother of Mr. Garfield Powery. I'm sure all of you know him.
Yep.
she just got up from the altar and she said, "All right, brothers and sisters, we can leave. That storm is not going to hit Grand Cayman." And so Mr. Dalmeans, the late Mr. Dalmean, his mother, Mrs. Flosse Ebanks, another saint, she got up and she said, "Well, I agree, we can leave the church now and go home and rest." And I thought, oh my goodness, but afterwards I had to chide myself. You were there praying for God to deliver you from the storm. And now they're saying it's not even going to come here. Whereas it was only 90 miles off, I think it was. That was the last that we had heard from Miami. Anyway, to make this as short as possible, we went home, we listened to our radios. It was the only line of communication that we had. And suddenly, the news service providers in Miami said that the reconnaissance plane had gone out and they were back. They brought the latest. And the hurricane was stationary. It was just sitting there in this one spot. It wasn't moving. The next thing we heard was that the hurricane had made a 90-degree turn and headed exactly toward the west, missing Grand Cayman. I call that the hurricane guide entitled this particular subject here, "The Curious Case of Hurricane Hattie." I, without any reluctance at all, will call it the miraculous case of Hurricane Hattie.
Or divine intervention.
This woman just simply got up, and it was as easy as if she had said, "You better take your umbrella, it's going to rain." We escaped so much. Unfortunately, Belize, when it hit Belize, many people know that. We heard about it days afterwards, that over 300 people died, over 10,000 were left homeless, and they had to simply rebuild Belize City higher up. But it is one of those cases, many, many cases, that Cayman has been blessed, and I experienced that, and I can tell you right now that it was something I will never forget. Although I was 19 years old at the time, I will never forget it. So all I want to say is that we prepare, we do everything we can. God gives us good common sense. I'm sure we should use it. I would encourage everyone who can get their hand on the Hurricane Guide 2015. There's so much valuable information in it. And of course, that along with all the other, knowledgeable individuals in Cayman, I believe that we can do much, much better with our safety than even what we encountered doing or were able to do during 2004. And in addition, the best of all, to commit ourselves and our island to God and simply depend on Him, because we'll never be out of a hurricane zone.
And don't pray just when hurricane is due to hit. We should pray all the time.
Absolutely. And of course, gentlemen, I thank you all for all of the your efforts and what you put into this, because this is an important subject when it comes to the Cayman Islands.
Thank you very much, Ms. Daphne.
God bless.
Thank you. Mr. Frederick, your timing was perfect because one of the areas that we wanted to go talk about was the community emergency response teams, the formation, of that, and the training that has gone on. I don't think that there's anyone, more knowledgeable about it than you are.
Well, for many years, we've tried to establish teams in the community, especially after Ivan and what we experienced after Ivan. And so far, we have 5 communities that we have trained individuals. They're all volunteers in basic disaster management. They've gotten first aid. They've got shelter management training, a little bit of search and rescue. So we try to give them as much training as they can to be able to help their communities. We have a CERT team in Northside, Belford Estates, working on one in Peace Bay. We just finished up Windsor Park. We have a team in North Sound Gardens and a huge team in West Bay. I think West Bay is the largest team that we have.
So
34 persons.
all districts are covered so far?
Not
What
all
about the sister
districts.
islands?
Not all districts are covered. We are planning to go to the sister island to do some training up there. We don't have any CERT teams in East End, and while we do have a team in Belford Estates, it doesn't really cover a lot. We have one small team in Georgetown, which is the Windsor Park, but we're planning to work with other communities such as the Prospect and Red Bay areas and the Tropical Gardens area.
Now, are you focusing more on the more vulnerable areas, or are you trying to get it, throughout in as many places as possible? Sorry.
Our initial focus was on the vulnerable areas, but we would like to have as many places as possible with the CERT team because they will have a lot of usefulness in terms of preparedness. I heard Quincy's question when I was driving in about assisting the elderly, and things like that is some of the things that CERT teams will do. But we can't just leave it up to the CERT teams. Friends and family, members of the community also need to do their part in assisting with the elderly and making sure that they're taken care of. So that is one of the areas that the CERT team can help, and would also be able to help us with damage assessment afterwards. In the event that there's a community that is cut off, they will be able to give us valuable information as to the type of damage that they have experienced. So we would like to get this airware, but we started to focus on the vulnerable communities, and we'll continue to work. And the BRAC, we're planning to do similar in Cayman Brac and Little Cayman.
Okay, we're going to go to our final commercial break. When we come back, we want to talk about some issues of price gouging that occurred during Hurricane Ivan. What legislation do we have in place for that? We want to talk a little bit more about mandatory evacuation, and we also want to talk about the UK's preparedness, in terms of assisting the Cayman Islands or the Caribbean after a disaster as well. So, folks, please stay tuned. We will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. Thanks for joining us in the discussion about hurricane season, the Atlantic hurricane season, which commenced today, 1st of June 2015. Here, joining us in the discussion this morning, we have the Honorable Franz Mandison, Deputy Governor of the Cayman Islands. We have Mr. Eric Bush, who's the Chief Officer in the Premier's Ministry, and we have the Director of Hazard Management, Cayman, Mr. McCleary Frederick. We promised you that we would talk about mandatory evacuation. That may be a strong terminology that is being used, one that some people like, some people don't like. It certainly raised its head during the course of Hurricane Ivan. Do we have a mandatory evacuation policy in the Cayman Islands?
Bluntly, no, sir. What we try to do in the Cayman Islands government is to best advise individuals when we believe they are in imminent danger, and advise and give them the best information that we have for them to prepare, to react, to respond to whatever threat is predicted. Persons in low-lying areas, elderly, persons in Little Cayman, that we have limited responses capability for during an event. We try to communicate what the perceived threat is, what our capabilities are, and what they will be after the event, because we try to make it clear that during a hurricane, emergency personnel, we are not sending them out during an event to put their life at risk, especially when individuals have all of the information that we have provided to them, have made a direct and deliberate and conscious choice, whether it be to ignore our advice, ignore our guidance, and stay in for whatever reason. So the government's policy is to best communicate what we believe the reasonable threats will be to them, but in particular their area, what our capabilities are, and what we are willing and not willing to do. One of those things is during an actual hurricane is to not send emergency personnel out of the secured and hardened areas to respond to areas whereby individuals have already been advised and made a decision not to accept our advice.
Okay, anything you want to add to that, Mr. Frederick?
Well, there's practical issues in terms of evacuations. There's some areas that I'm sure that people would think that, well, we should have a mandatory evacuation. But again, like Mr. Bush said, we provide them with the best advice that we can, and it's really up to you. At one time, we had suggested that we leave a tag that they could use to attach so that we'll know who's who when we came out, especially in low-lying areas. It is that serious. But if the individual doesn't want to leave, there's not much more we can do other than arrest them, and then what?
Mm-hmm. Okay. 2000, okay, we have one caller. I just want to mention this and we'll go to the caller. 2004, Law 24 of 2004, the Cayman Islands introduced a bill called the Price Gouging Control Emergency Circumstances Law of 2004. And what it basically did was it established the Price Gouging Control Commission, and it looked at increases in prices for commodities during a period of emergency or during a period following a natural disaster. Power to obtain information under this part, the part of the law, and to investigate complaints, and the ability to refer matters to the legal department by the commission, because we saw some instances of price gouging after Hurricane Ivan as well. So government saw fit to put that in place. People talk about it now, in terms of gas prices and stuff like that, but it was designed specifically for emergency situations or situations after a disaster. Let's go to our phone lines. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Orton.
Good morning, Mr. Orrit. How are you?
Okay, and good morning to you guests.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, I think if the government are able to find the funds, I think what we need to do is we need to build a building. It's a foundation, I would say, at least 7 feet in height, and put this building far inland as possible away from the ocean, where government are able to store everything that we might need in case of emergency. For example, say boats, trucks, backhoes, generators, and all emergency supplies. That after a hurricane, we know that all these things will be safe in this building, that we're able to use these things in order to help get the country back in order, and we're able to get to individuals who might need assistance as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much, for that, caller. We do have some a purpose-built building now in the BRAC, I believe. Was the new was it the
the
environment the DOE building in the BRAC, Mr. Frederick or Mr. Madison?
Well, actually, they had built a hurricane shelter in the BRAC up by the football field.
Right.
That was a purpose-built building, but the intention was to house shelterees not what he was speaking of. I mean, we in preparing for hurricanes and approaching for hurricanes, we do take our equipment and try to secure them best as possible in locations. One of the places that we do locate equipment to deploy afterwards and secure government vehicles is the agriculture grounds. It's inland, it's high. And then we also try to deploy to safe locations vehicles that will be able to assist with the recovery afterwards. You know, the point about storing food and other supplies that we can use afterwards. This is why we try to implore the individuals to make their own personal preparations. You know, government can't do everything, and the more you are prepared, the less dependent you are on somebody else. And the quicker we can get the country back to doing business and back to normal, then the supermarkets and the hardware stores and the others can get back to providing those things that the individuals might need to recover from. You know, we don't want to be distributing generators in front of A.L. Thompson, and A.L. Thompson is open for business and they have generators for sale. You know, so we want to be able to have the residents and the businesses as resilient as possible so that they can get back to business as quickly as possible. We can get back to normal as quickly as possible, and that those providers provide the things that you may need to recover from any event that we may face.
Okay, we want to talk about the UK's involvement. And before you joined us, Mr. Frederick, we also talked about the Caribbean region, and you know, we have CARICOM. We always attend the hurricane conferences that are hosted by the United States, but what do we have regionally that we join up all of our offices of disaster preparedness together? So we'd like you to expand on that. But before we go to that, we want to talk about and the UK's involvement in hurricane preparedness, their contingency plans that they have in place for the overseas territories, because certainly there was a lot of excitement and anticipation when we heard that the UK support ship was heading to the Cayman Islands, and we expected to get assistance from them. We were certainly disappointed when they got here and found out that they really didn't have a whole lot to offer, bearing in mind that a lot of their resources had already been used up in Grenada after Hurricane, and I'm talking about after Hurricane Ivan now, had already been used up in Grenada. But we now understand, I believe that there's a staging area in Panama or something of that nature as well. Mr. Manson, what exactly is the UK prepared to do if we're hit by a major hurricane in the Cayman Islands again?
Right. Well, I'll just talk a little bit about some lessons learned, and then I'll ask the other guests to expand.
Sure.
But there has been significant lessons learned by the UK in terms of their response, and their priorities should be to the overseas territories. So yes, they do have the ships in the Caribbean during the hurricane season, and they now have put the necessary supplies on there to ensure that we do get assistance. But I think what is very important is that there has to be the managed expectation. So we now understand exactly what they will be able to do, what they can't do. They're not going to get involved in internal security. They're, they will be able to provide some assistance, but they're not going to be the sort of end all for assistance. So we need to have our own preparedness, because the UK's response quite reasonably will be limited in terms of what they can do immediately after the storm. We may be able to provide assistance on a long-term basis or more assistance, but immediately after the storm, then they can provide assistance.
Okay.
Well, one of the things that the UK have done, and this goes to also answer part of the question about regional efforts, for the last 10 years or so, the FCO has held a conference for disaster managers from all the overseas territories. And at the start of these meetings, to be honest with you, I had absolutely no idea who disaster managers were in any of the overseas territories. And now, I mean, we have a really good relationship with all of the disaster managers in all the overseas territories. So that is one thing that they have done. They've continued to bring the disaster managers together to share experiences, best practices, and also to talk about the preparedness in each of the overseas territories. And honestly, I would be quite comfortable if one of the directors from the overseas territories would volunteer to give me a break in the event that we had an effect. To go home and know that they know enough about what we do and I know enough about what they do that they could come and assist and I could go and assist. We've worked with all of the territories basically to help them in whatever areas needs. We sent one of our staff members to Montserrat to assist them with their radio system. We've been to BVI. We've helped out Turks and Caicos with their stuff, giving them training and so on. He's as assisting with Anguilla with helping with job descriptions for their agents as they were trying to build it. So we have that type of relationship that only came about because of the involvement of the FCO. Outside of that, we have, like you said, CARICOM, and CARICOM had established SEDIMA. And SEDIMA, again, we can't expect limited response if you're a member state because they have limited resources. Right now, we're not a member of SEDIMA. So we have to depend on our own preparedness, our own resilience to be able to respond, and that is one of the things that the UK has stressed is that we have this ship in the area that will come to provide whatever assistance that we can provide, but you have to be reasonable in the amount of the assistance that you're going to get. We have DFID that operates in the area, but their supplies are not so readily available. They did stock some stuff here up until a year ago, but they didn't consider that it was feasible to keep those supplies, so they were distributed to all overseas territories. So we have a stock of tarps and water bottles and other things that were donated by DFID that we have in storage. So we also have some of those materials over in the BRAC where we sent to the BRAC so that they have materials to have some response.
Does the impression that the Cayman Islands are a rich jurisdiction hurt us in any way? Because it's one thing for the United Kingdom to say, we'll do certain things for you, but we will, you have to do so much on your own. But yet we see the amount of aid that they pile into independent countries, sometimes seeking to a sphere of influence or to exert political influence in those countries. So we see, tons of money going to independent countries, and for them to say to the Cayman Islands, well, we'll do something for you, but you're going to have to do the major part of it yourself. That is almost a slap in the face. But as civil servants, I don't expect you all to comment too much on that. I can now.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Cohen, I think what is important is that what they're saying is here's what we can do immediately. Obviously, if we are in really bad shape and there's long-term need, then I don't think they will forsake us. But in terms of their immediate response, yes, they can have a helicopter and a ship that we can do some reconnaissance, search and rescue, whatever. They can have tarps and water purification tablets and all those kind of things. But in terms of, if we need long-term help, then that can't be done by the ship that visits. So I think we just need to keep that in perspective. But I don't think they are going to forsake us at all.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate that they can respond to a situation in Iraq and get warplanes up in the air in less than no time to bomb. We should get some fast planes that are able to deliver goods to us, as easily. Peace is more important than war.
Yes.
Gentlemen, we're getting to about that time, so I want to give you all final opportunity to make some final comments. We certainly hope that this will only be the first and certainly not the last time that we will be here discussing the disaster preparedness, hurricane preparedness in the Cayman Islands, because the hurricane season will last for 6 months, and we really need to keep all of our people on their P's and Q's in relation to this. So we'll start with Mr. Frederick, and the Deputy Governor will have the last say.
Well, I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of the volunteers that we have. This year we've been focusing on volunteerism. And, we have a lot of volunteers that help us out in shelter management. We have all the volunteers in the certain teams. And we continue to build our base of volunteers. We can always use more help. We can always use more shelter managers, because in the event that we are affected by a storm, it's not just the period of the storm, but we may have extended shelter needs based on what may happen. And I just want to express our thanks and gratitude to all of those individuals that have volunteered in any shape or form, and also to mention the Cadet Corps and the great job that they have done in volunteering to help us out in the EOC in terms of answering the radios and the phones. Like I said, this involves all of us, and we all need to do our part in making Cayman prepared and responding to any issues that we may have.
Mr. Bush?
Thank you, sir. Following on with that, I'd like to also thank Mr. McCleary and his team in HMCI for their leadership and guidance in preparing us the best we can be for any hazard, let alone hurricane season 2015. One of their pieces of work that they continue to improve is their website, caymanprepared.gov.ky, which has a wealth of knowledge, not just for individuals, families, but also for businesses. So I encourage any and all to please visit caymanprepared.gov.ky to review the information and recommendations, review where our shelters are, what the capabilities and capacity is for their closest shelter. Make your plans, use the checklist, and be prepared.
Finally, Mr. Madison.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for having us. I think it's been excellent for us to be able to share with the audience, the listening audience, the information on the fact that we all need to be prepared. I think I want to just drive home the fact that the issue with the passports, in that you cannot just walk into the passport office and get your passport renewed tomorrow. So please pay attention to that fact and get your travel documents reviewed, and get them reissued if they need. Get your visas, get your waivers, anything that you need, and please keep them in a safe place in the event of a hurricane. Also, to have your personal preparedness plan, know where you're going to go, look after your pets. That is something that I want to drive home again. It's, so many people in the Cayman Islands now have pets. Please make sure you have a plan for that. And the government is ready. We will, Mr. Frederick and his team have done an excellent job in getting us prepared again this year. But it's important that we all have our own personal plans so that we know exactly what we're going to do in the event of a hurricane. And we, certainly want to wish everyone God richest blessings this hurricane season. We pray that God will spare us again this year, but we need to be prepared.
Okay, I want to thank you all for appearing on For the Record, and I just want to put my little plug in as well. Our Scouts headquarters, located on Middle Road near the Christa Tomlinson Hospital. It is hurricane rated. It won't be an official shelter, but we certainly look forward to offering any shelter to the neighbors, in the vicinity there, if we were to ever experience a hurricane, to be able to assist them and house some of them there as well. And of course, that building is being built with some funds provided by the Cayman Islands government, as well as other donors like All Foundation, DART, HSBC, Charles Jennings, lots of companies, Maples. I shouldn't have started naming because I don't want to miss out any of them, but certainly, and we're in the process of finalizing construction now, so that will be available as well. Folks, I want to remind you that you've been listening to For the Record. I have been your host, Orrit Connor, and my guest in the studio with me this morning, we had the Deputy Governor, Honorable Franz Manderson. We had Mr. Eric Bush, who is the Chief Officer in the Premier's Ministry, and we had Mr. McCleary Frederick, who is the Director of Hazard Management, Cayman. I want to also remind you that For the Record was not only brought to you by LED Lighting Engineering and Design, but also by FinCor Finance and Corporate Services, where they're client-focused, technology-driven, and cost-effective. And finally, I want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who is less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. We need to look out for the more vulnerable in our society. And on that note, I want to remind you that our elderly, Quincy talked about them this morning, our elderly are extremely vulnerable. If you have a neighbor who is elderly, a friend who is elderly, this is hurricane season. Stop by, help them be prepared, ensure that they have everything in place, that there are emergency contact numbers, that if they have to be evacuated from where they're staying, that there are measures in place. You can do your part individually to make sure that we are resilient and prepared during this hurricane season. Finally, I just want to say to you, continue to listen to Radio Cayman. Join Sterling Doreen Ebanks this afternoon on Talk Today. Finance Committee proceedings still being carried live by Breeze 105.3 FM in the Cayman Islands. You can listen there. We hope that the MLAs will continue to be on their best behavior as well. And I say to you all, have a great day. God bless.